with this as well. So you might want to stay tuned about it because if you didn't know, now you kind of got an idea. Now let's go ahead and dive in because I know you guys have seen the posts lighting up in your feeds for at least the last month, and the headlines on forums and social media platforms that are yelling Trump new laws are banning foreign spouses from getting that 50% in a divorce. You've got a lot of people that are claiming that, if she decides to walk off, that, you've got protection now. It's a kind of rumor that gets you guys talking. It's perfectly engineered to sound like a win. And if you're a US citizen married to a foreign national, the idea that the government has your back and is protecting you from a bad divorce settlement sounds pretty good. So let's cut to the chase, though. It's a flat out lie. A president can't just scrap state divorce laws. It just doesn't happen because laws are made on a federal level and then heavily scrutinized on the state level, and then further scrutinized on the city level. So it is loosely written on the federal level, more tightly written on the state level, even more tightly written on the city level. And then they still have like county and ordinance levels that are even more strict, which comes to a second topic where you guys have to look at the laws in the city and state that you live in the country that you live in the province that you live in, and see what laws applies to the things that you plan on doing in life. Because while it might be okay on one city block, it is not okay on another city block because the laws change once you cross counties, once you cross districts, once you cross out of one jurisdiction into another jurisdiction. And knowing that holistically in most areas where you function that you're going to be covered, the one area where you're not covered by the law, that's the area where you got to be extra cautious. So you can just free flow your life and assume that nobody's going to come and get you, but the natives in that one area that is not in your favor is more likely to pop up out of nowhere and be like, hey, you're not doing it right. Everybody's experienced that Karen that comes out of nowhere and just applies the pressure to things that have nothing to do with her. So you understand that when you are existing in life, it doesn't matter what country around the world that you're in, especially if you're traveling from country to country, everything, including how to get off the airplane, how you need to know what rules are around that. Because if you're not correct, the laws from your old country don't apply in the new country. The laws in the airport in your old country don't apply to the new country. So you really have to pay attention to what's going on. And that's what we're going to be doing with here. Because as I told you, the president is not going to scrap state laws. They can invoke federally level mandates that forces states to amend their laws certain ways, and then the states do whatever they want after that. However, we have seen where states like Texas and California and Maine have rebelled against demands from the country this year, where until an agreement was set, the expectations from the president and the actions of the governors of the states were not the same. Now, uh, one of the reasons why this rumor spread, that's because the fear of marriage fraud and financially devastating divorces is a very real thing. Now, on tonight's show, we're going to do three things. First, we'll dismantle the lie and show you exactly why it's legally impossible. And then, second, we'll reveal the one document that creates a massive financial obligation for you guys, fellas, in a divorce. A contract most sponsors don't understand that they're signing. And then, third, we'll walk through what actually happens to your spouse's green card if your marriage ends. So you'll understand the whole picture. Now, the internet can be an engine for misinformation, especially when immigration and divorce get mixed up. In early 2025, a tidal wave of bad info started spreading, claiming a new Trump law was stripping immigration spouses of financial rights. The Post insisted that the standard 50-50 asset split was gone, creating this idea that a U.S. citizen could sponsor a spouse, end the marriage, and not risk losing half his assets. Now, this story is so effective because it sounds like a solution to a real problem. As a sponsor, you're taking a huge leap of faith. The idea that you could get taken for a ride, that someone could use you for a green card and then clean you out in court is a powerful fear. And we've seen so many guys in the comments and the forums asking if this law is real, hoping that their financial future has just been secured by a new rule. I want to give you guys the straight facts. These claims are completely wrong. Okay. They're on this and that. We're bound by the truth. And any information that I did not bring to you, I'm sure Michael will. Special shout out to Michael Wilbur, the admin. He's going to be watching the comment section. Now, uh, this rumor is built on a total misunderstanding of how U.S. laws work. Okay. But just saying it's false isn't enough. To protect yourself, you need to understand why it's false. And more importantly, what the truth is. So we never find a problem without bringing you a solution. And the truth is a lot more complex. And frankly, it's not what most guys want to hear. I'm more willing to be the bearer of bad news. Prefer that you guys like and subscribe. But I understand if I get a few thumbs down because the truth hurts and a lot of people like to attack the messenger. But it's not much I can do about that because as a uniformed podcast, I determined to bring you guys the most accurate information where it is not exclusively beneficial to one side or the other. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. But if it makes sense, it should make sense for everyone involved, no matter if they're male or female, what nationality, what financial status they're in. If it's fair, it's fair. And if it's not fair, it's not fair. Now, if it's not fair, we can make it fair, but that requires society to make changes. But we have to first recognize that change needs to be made. Now, the biggest financial hook in a marriage based green card case doesn't come from a state divorce court. It comes from a federal contract that you signed with the United States government. And this isn't something that a lot of people know about when they think about, oh, we're just going to run down to the justice of the peace and we're going to get hitched. It's not the same when you're marrying somebody from another country. First, we're going to break down that viral rumor and the actual law that probably sparked it. Now, this 2025 of 1st of August, we had one big beautiful bill act or the OBBBA, and we're going to explain the separation of federal and state power to show you why a president can't tell a judge in California or Florida, special shout out to those of y'all out there in Florida, how to dive or divide your property. And I can tell you, I've been in Florida for so long that, memorizing a lot of the laws that apply that are enforced, because they got some ridiculous laws that they do not enforce anymore, but they're still active laws. And if they decided to enforce them, a lot of people would be pissed off about not being able to do anal in their house. So, but again, this isn't just a talking point, it's a fundamental part of the United States legal system. So I want you guys to be able to understand this. And next, we're going to shift from that to debunking the myth to explaining your realities. And this is where we'll talk about the single most important document determining your financial obligation, a form I-864 form I-864. And I'm going to throw this out there. So any of you ladies out there that's married to a dude and you don't know what form that you need to file, got you. Fellas, if you don't know what form to get you from underneath this scenario, got you. It's in the comment section. And guys, just note that whenever I put stuff, links into the comment section or information into the comment section when the show replays, you can go to the live chat on the replay and it will show you that information in real time. So right when I started talking about it, that's when it pops up in the comment section. Now, uh, this form I-87, which is and the affidavit of support is what we're talking about right now. Now, we'll spend a good amount of time here explaining what it is and what you promised the government by filling out and signing this form and how that contract can be used against you in court even after a divorce. And this is the knowledge that you really need to know because when I cover a topic, I'm not just covering a topic just to take up your time and entertain you. I only primarily cover topics that directly impact your money, whether it's a positive impact or a negative impact, directly impacts your money. Finally, we'll tackle the big question of deportation. What happens to that 2 year conditional green card if the marriage ends? Because that's one of the biggest things that made people think that this was going to be a fantastic thing for the men because the conditional green card implies that if she's not married to the dude, she's more likely sent back to her country and any contractual agreements that she has on American soil that applies to her American status is null and void because she no longer has the American status and she's no longer in America. She can't take action on it from overseas. We're going to get into that. We're going to explain the I-751 petition and the critical good faith marriage. So I want you guys to understand that I-751 petition. I'm gonna stick that in there. I need to understand that this is some stuff that anybody who is not an American citizen and you're trying to get citizenship through marriage, you might want to take a look at some of this stuff because some of this stuff could benefit you in the long run. And hold on a second, let me get this over there for you guys over in TikTok side because or Twitter X side because I wanted you guys to see this over Twitter. Um, we have it in the comment section, but I don't always put the comment section on the screen unless you guys are talking. And feel free, highly interactive, to put your 2 cents in along the way because even if you don't agree with me, I'm all about having a regular conversation with you guys about it. Now, the good faith marriage waiver is the I-751 petition that allows an immigrant to get their 10-year permanent green card on their own without their marriage partner. Okay, we're going to be going further into that. And then we will also cover what happens when abuse is a factor in the divorce and how the law applies to both male and female victims. All right. Now, tonight's show is meant to be a complete source. It's detailed and it is designed to be a shield against bad information. So if you want to understand your real obligations and protect your future, make sure that you guys stick around. And if you want uh, more no bullshit information, factual breakdowns of these laws. Make sure that you guys take a second on YouTube, on Twitch, and on Twitter X to like the platform, subscribe, follow to make sure that whenever we go live, especially if you hit the notification button on YouTube, you'll get a push notification when we go live because we don't always go live exactly at the same time every day, but we go live every day. You'll be notified that we went live in the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes of the show, giving you guys updates and reminders. So right when we get into the nitty gritty, you'll be sliding right on into the show. Want to make sure that you guys are able to not miss out on any of the important information that I like to bring to you guys so that you guys can improve yourselves. So let's get into it. The rumor moved fast. Okay. Trump changes divorce laws, no 50% property share. That story went out there right around the same time when they claimed that Trump was giving tax deductions to the fathers and the mothers would not have the tax deduction. Remember, I had to cover that one and I had to explain to you guys that no, he was just making it a tax deduction to the people who are paying child support. So, and then they increased the tax credits based on whatever the person paying child support is covering. They get that credit. And then the other person who has primary possession of the child is going to claim the child there and they're going to get that credit. But you're going to have to both prove that you're contributing to the child, which means that you're probably going to have to start showing some receipts about child care or claiming. And this is better because back in the day, only one person could claim the child on their taxes. What Trump did is that everybody who is paying for the child can claim the child on their taxes. You just got to claim exactly how much you put towards the child on your taxes. That's going to be the scrutiny. Now it's probably going to delay your tax returns, but that you both are going to get something out of the deal. That was a change. So you got to understand when we started talking about marriages and family law changing, we've had a lot of false stories that came out there, and the stories usually paired with a photo of President Trump signing something and claimed that he used his power to stop something like immigrant spouses from getting an equal share of assets. The narrative was simple, and the thought that this was to protect American citizens from foreigners just looking for a payday. I mean, it was powerful, catchy. But again, I'm going to tell you guys, totally false. This viewpoint was championed by an online figure like Darwin McPherson. And I actually came across his podcast a few days ago, who claimed on his podcast that the immigration system, specifically the conditional green card, is designed to protect the American men from being taken advantage of. And when he was going through this uh, explanation. It was a 20-minute video, and he was explaining how passport bros have like this really keen advantage on their side now because of the ideology of the conditional green card, meaning that their citizenship is conditional to the marriage. The argument promoted in circles like these is that the 2 year conditional period acts as a shield, preventing a foreign spouse from taking half and then leaving the country or leaving the man. This belief taps into a real fear, but it dangerously misinterprets how the system works. While the conditional period is meant to detect fraud, it does not alter state divorce laws or automatically protects U.S. sponsors' assets. Protections against marriage fraud are built in the immigration process itself, not state family court. To see why the rumor is false, you have to find the grain of truth that made it seem plausible. So, in the summer of 2025, and the Trump administration did pass that huge piece of legislation about the big, beautiful bill, the law was real, but its contents had almost nothing to do with divorce. The rumor was born by mixing a real, high profile bill with a made up, hope based story. Ah, we had that flicker. There it is. Make sure that it doesn't throw us out of here. Now, the core reason this rumor is impossible comes down to a basic principle of American government, which is federalism. The United States has two parallel court systems, federal court and state court. The federal government's rule book covers things affecting the whole country: immigration, national defense, and bankruptcy. When a president signs an immigration bill, like the Big Beautiful Bill, he operating in a federal system. USCIS and immigration courts are all part of that system. But the states have their own rule books for the daily lives of their residents. And this includes almost all of family law. State lawmakers write the laws on marriage, divorce, child custody, and most importantly, how property gets divided. This brings back to some of those comments that was being made by some of the people who would troll the podcast and ask about the same-sex marriage and the same-sex divorce and what our opinions of it was. And some states have not changed from the equal access for same-sex marriage and same-sex divorce. So while some people are claiming that the LGBTQ community can't get married anymore, if a law does get passed to put a stop to that, the ones who are already married are grandfathered into the marriage laws. Now, when they get divorced, they wouldn't be able to remarry under if the law changed because it hasn't. But the fact is that anything that was the way it was before a law changes, you are grandfathered into benefiting from it if you took advantage of it when the law existed in that fashion. The same way gun laws are now changing where you don't have to pay that tax down. When gun laws change to where you don't have to register your firearm, it doesn't change the fact that the people who registered their firearm are not going to have to keep up with their registration because now they're incorporated in that list of people who put their weapons online or put their weapons on file. The rest of us who are like, I ain't registering nothing. When the law says you don't got to register it no more, you can then start doing whatever you want to do with all of your unregistered firearms. But until then, anything that isn't reported to ATF that's supposed to be reported to ATF is technically considered a felony. You just won't be held against you if, in the event, they don't catch you with the felony qualifying items after the law passes saying that it's no longer a felony to perform that way. So let's understand that. Now, a family court judge in your local courthouse applies those state laws, and a president has zero authority to tell that judge what to do. A divorce case uh, is heard in state court, not federal court. So, for a president to change property division laws in all 50 states, it would take something massive like a constitutional amendment or a Supreme Court decision. And most of the decisions that Trump is making is occurring outside of the Supreme Court process, which has been one of the largest complaints over the last 9 months. And there are very few individuals who agree with not getting Supreme Court approval before taking action, claiming that his executive order power might be far reaching and, and arbitrary. But the fact is that when he says, and he does with his executive orders, there are enough followers of the Trump administration that put it into action, even if the Supreme Court disagrees with it. Okay. An executive order or a regular bill from Congress can't do it. It's legally and structurally impossible. So, what did the Big Beautiful Bill of 2025 actually do? At its heart, it was an immigration enforcement and tax bill. Okay. It didn't touch divorce. Instead, it funneled tons of money to agencies like ICE and CBP. It paid for thousands of new agents, more detention spaces, and partnerships with local police to ramp up arrest and deport people who are not supposed to be here. For marriage-based green cards, big beautiful bill didn't change the rules much, but it did lead to stricter procedural scrutiny. A special shout out to mixed martial arts. What's going on, mix? Now, this means that while the law itself didn't change, the process got more intense. Immigration officers were told to do tougher interviews, ask far more, ask for far more proof, and look harder for fraud. Now, the point was to enforce existing rules more aggressively, not to rewrite family law for you. So, fellas, don't think that there's this massive overhaul of laws that's benefiting men. It's pretty easy to see how this got twisted. The news was all about huge new Trump immigration law and a crackdown in the social media echo chamber. Stricter scrutiny of marriages morphed into fishing immigrants in a divorce or punishing immigrants in a divorce. And the information became the simple viral lie, no more 50-50. Mm, not really the same. How your property is actually divided in a divorce is still decided by one of two state level systems. You have a community property states like California, Texas, and Arizona uses this rule. And here, almost everything earned or bought during the marriage is considered community property and is typically split 50-50. Your spouse's immigration status doesn't matter when it comes to that. Equitable distribution states, most states, including New York and Florida, use this principle. Uh, Marital property is divided equitably or fairly, which doesn't always mean equally. The judge looks at many factors, and your spouse's immigration status isn't supposed to be a factor in who gets what. Special shout out to TF Fireball. Could a prenuptial agreement change that rule? The prenuptial agreement, when it comes down to signing a contract to not get your spouse's assets, if you have a rock solid prenuptial agreement, meaning that you would claim all assets, foreign and domestic, that you are in control of before the marriage, that you benefit with during the marriage, even assets that the government originally didn't know existed, if it can play a factor in your ability to gain capital during the marriage and contribute to the marriage. Uh, if you document everything and the contract isn't voided by things like infidelity or abuse or abandonment, then yeah, it can protect you from your assets being seized on the contract. However, a lot of men go through this uh, thing where they say, hey, prenuptial agreement and list some assets, not all assets, or the assets that were listed when the marriage before the marriage occurred are not the assets that exist now, and they don't amend the prenup throughout the marriage to make sure that they have an updated version where the stuff that is not listed in this contract that says everything in this contract you don't gain access to. Well, what if you only had one house and one car and two bank accounts when you signed that contract originally? Throughout your marriage, you've got 30 cars, 48 houses, and 52 bank accounts. All the rest of that stuff that's not on the prenup is still fair game because the prenup says everything in this contract you get nothing out of. So prenups can only go so far. could a different entity such as an LLC do anything? If the business owns the assets, your personal life is usually not tied to the business when the business is a standalone business like a C corporation and some LLCs. If you've got a shell corporation that is under your name that isn't really doing anything and you're the only person in that shell corporation, it's almost still kind of tied to you, but you can get the right lawyer to say, hey, technically that business owns it. And while he's the owner of the business, he's not the owner of the assets. He just controls the business. So that can give you a little bit of protection. You would do better having the business being owned by the trust and then having the trust being an offshore trust and then having a trustee that is not you operating the trust where you are just a beneficiary of the trust, where the beneficiary of the trust might be able to contractually utilize the business and contractually utilize the assets, but because you are just a beneficiary, you are separate from the business and the trust and the assets owned from the trust, which means in a divorce, your partner cannot take anything from you that you don't own, and they can't take anything from another party that is not you because they're divorcing you. Now, if you have your partner invest in your business, then as an investor, she's entitled to compensation out of the partnership. So you got to think about that. But also, you have to recognize that if she contributes to the trust and the trust is designed for her to receive certain benefits as a beneficiary, whatever she put into the trust is in there. And outside of the clauses of guarantors getting back what they put into the trust, once it goes into the trust, it's part of the trust. You get what you get out of it as a equal share or marginally shared beneficiary of the trust. So you got to really go over these things with your lawyers before you start getting yourselves put into prenuptial agreements and making your spouse known about all of the assets that you have uh, at, access to. But you also understand that part of the scrutiny of where we're going to get into this in a second, but part of the scrutiny of making sure that your marriage is not a fraud is that your wife is supposed to be able to know things that wives are supposed to know, such as where's your money coming from and where's it going. And if she's going to mutually contribute to this situation or if there's going to be something else that's going to be going on. So we're going to be carrying on to that. So this whole rumor about a 50-50 ban, uh, it's a total fabrication because no law like that exists. Your risk of losing assets is governed by the laws of your state, same as any other divorce. Now, the real financial contract that you guys are going to be tied to, your obligation under the affidavit of support I 864 is going to be exactly what you guys are going to have to pay the most attention to before you go and get that foreign wife. So we've bust that 50-50 myth. Now let's talk about the financial trap that is very real, legally binding, and specifically designed to hold you accountable. And ladies, this applies to you as well. If you go overseas, get you a foreign husband, you become a sponsor, this applies to you. Okay. Form I 864, the affidavit of support. When you sponsored your spouse for a green card, you had to sign this form. Not a lot of people like to read forms. You should probably read this one. Many guys think it's just another piece of paperwork, but it's one of the most dangerous documents that you can sign. The I 864 is a legally enforceable contract between you, the sponsor, and the United States government. That ain't got nothing to do with your spouse. Okay? That's between you and Uncle Sam. Now, your immigrant spouse is the third party beneficiary of that contract, which gives them the legal right to sue you to enforce it when necessary. So, what did you actually promise? By signing I-864, you swore to the government that you would financially support your spouse to ensure their income never falls below 125% of the federal poverty guidelines. This isn't a vague promise, it's a specific and legally binding financial duty. All right, let's break that down. The federal poverty guidelines changes every year, so this value will go up. So let's say for one person household, 125% of the poverty line is $18,750. If you guys understand that the poverty expectation is, if I remember correctly, about 14,700, so 125%, that makes sense for $18,750. Now, if your spouse's annual income from their job for some unknown reason is only $10,000, which is highly unlikely, but if it were to happen, if they were unemployed or working part time or whatever, you are legally on the hook for the other $8,750. Now, that does not mean that you've got to pay your wife a salary, but if you're giving your wife, for those men who marry a woman overseas and they're sending money back home to the wife's family, keep your receipts for the wire transfers, because that you could claim as money given to your wife that she is inherently sending back to her family back home to cover this the scenario. However, if you're covering her standard of living and she's living a 50,000 or $75,000 lifestyle with you, that $8,750, you're kind of covering it in her standard of living. However, uh, if they have no income, you owe them the full 1,000, $18,750 a year. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, but when you think about, almost 19,000 a year that you're going to have to give this chick or this dude, because it's the foreign spouse, whether it's a man or a woman, if they can't support themselves or choose not to support themselves, you're financially obligated to cover for them. That's what it says. But here's the most critical part, especially if you're facing divorce. When does this financial obligation actually end? Well, many sponsors wrongly believe that a divorce ends their responsibility. That is absolutely false. The USCIS policy is explicit. Divorce does not end the sponsorship obligation. So the I-864 contract only ends when one of five specific things happen. Your spouse becomes a U.S. citizen, where your spouse has officially worked 40 qualifying quarters, which is about 10 years. Your spouse permanently leaves the United States and abandons their green card. Your spouse dies or you die. Well, if your spouse is not a U.S. citizen, you have to cover them for 10 years. Uh, if your spouse goes back home and they're no longer seeking a green card, you can cut it out. Now, the this part here is tricky because clearly the last two we don't want to have happen. You're not going to end up dead, and you don't want your spouse to end up dead, and we don't want any crimes committed in order to make this look like it happened. Let's focus on real quick your spouse leaving the US and abandoning their green card. I want to touch base on this real quick because I know that some people might think, oh, well, I could just put her on a plane and send her back to where she came from. Let's be honest. If you married her Y'all aren't getting along, right? You are threatening to bring her back home one way or another, right? And let's say that you put her on a plane, you guys get on the plane and y'all fly back. Typically, there's supposed to be one round trip tickets because we don't live there, and there should be a ticket under her name. Now, let's say that you get her back to her home country, right? And you finagle the system where you cancel her flight back, right? She didn't agree to abandon the green card. You guys are still married. You have to divorce. She has to be present for the divorce because no legal actions can occur in the United States without all parties involved in the action present. If she gets the money to fly back to the United States and then get the right lawyer, not only can she take you for the trickery that you just caused her, the cost of getting back herself, the separation, the abandonment of the marriage, which satisfies divorce, she could potentially get the until citizenship has been enforced upon her, she could technically ride that 6 to 10 year wave of getting citizenship, have you legally obligated to pay for her, and potentially get all kinds of alimony. Because a lot of times in divorce court, if you leave a girl stranded in another country, the judge is not going to be nice to you. So don't think that you can just boot her out. It would have to be a mutual agreement that you guys are going to divorce and you're going to bring her back home and she's going to stay there. You might want to get her to sign some documents that agrees that she is withdrawing from the marriage and the green card applications. Because if you don't do it correctly, just like changing the locks on your doors when you're trying to kick somebody out without actually serving them eviction papers, there are legal consequences for self-help remedies, do-it-yourself remedies to get yourself out of a situation without following the proper channels. So once you get into this, you're in it for the long haul unless you can honestly prove that the marriage was fake and that you were a victim of the fraud. Because we understand that there are people who proposition Americans for citizenship where they pay them a certain quantity of money to lie and say that they're in a relationship, that they're getting married, and then after the marriage works itself out, and the person gets their green card, they just get a divorce and go their separate ways. Typically, riding the wave for up to 5 years under a false marriage, and then they go their separate ways. Um, the problem with that is that while the stricter laws are going to be fishing for more of those and try to weed those out, it is not going to stop that from happening. But there is fraud consequences, and we're going to be talking about that later. And if it is found that both parties were involved in the fraud, both parties receive the consequence outside of the extradition part, because the foreigner, when recognized as fraud, might get deported, but the citizen of America won't get deported. But all of the legal fines and jail time that's applied to the fraud does still apply. So when you're proving that the marriage was a sham, you can't just rat yourself out and say, "Oh, we set this up together." You have to prove that you yourself was tricked and bamboozled, and that is going to take some workings. So we're going to talk about that as we go along. Um, but that's the list. A final divorce decree does not end the obligation, as you guys can see. Even a prenup that waives the alimony cannot waive the spouse's right to that legal contract with the government under I 864. So TF Fireball was asking about the prenuptial agreement. The prenuptial agreement protects your assets, so she won't get alimony from you. And this contract is not alimony. This contract says that I will not bring a poor person into this country and leave them destitute. I will keep them from being destitute. That's what this contract is basically saying. So if they come, they are your financial responsibility. until they go or get their citizenship. And whatever you got to do to help them get their citizenship, if they're going to stay in this country, you got to do that. Otherwise, you keep paying for them until they get their citizenship. Courts have repeatedly found that the I-864 is a separate federal contract that a private agreement can't override. Okay. This means that if your marriage ends and your ex spouse can't support themselves at that 125% level, they have the right to sue you for this support, which is not alimony, because this is a contract with the federal government. So if you understand that, if y'all get a divorce, you know that you're going to be paying her the difference of $19,000 a year until she can afford to cover that. And that's the part that you got to understand. The 125% that you are obligated to is that if she can't do it herself, which is kind of nearly impossible in this country, because with minimum wage being what it is, the average individual should be making $30,000 to $50,000 a year. So if she can't make 19,000 a year for whatever reason, trying to be a babysitter, business ain't got off the ground yet, she's not making it yet, then you got to pay. But if she can get a job and she can work and that job is paying her more than the 125% level, she can pay for herself. And you won't have to give her anything because this is not alimony. This is just saying you're not going to leave her poor and broke and starving to death on American soil. That's all that's saying. Okay. Big difference. Now, it's a completely separate legal claim based on that federal contract. And their lawyers will absolutely use this against you. And in these claims, you can understand that there is opportunities if you guys have been separated for an extended period of time and the citizenship has not been enforced, she hasn't put in enough hours, the back pay of this contract from the time you stopped contributing to this claim till the time that the judge rules can all be entangled into one due amount, the same way back child support slaps you in the face when you find out at 17 that you got to pay for child support. It's important to understand the difference. Now, alimony comes from state family law, not the I-864. Now, however, this I-864 is a contractual obligation to ensure your ex doesn't become a public charge, meaning the state's not going to be paying for it. They can pursue both in divorce, meaning that they can get that 19,000 a year and alimony at the same time. For example, if the I-864 support level is about 19,000 and the judge awards them 12,000 a year in alimony, you could still owe them the remaining 6,750 under the I-864. So if they were getting 12,000 a year in alimony, and that 12,000 a year is less than the 19,000, you would have to give them the other 7,000 difference anyway. You understand? Now, if alimony exceeds that, then you just got to pay alimony. But if you're in a situation where whatever they're entitled to is less than that 19,000, you still got to give them that 19,000 regardless. And this isn't just a theory. Courts have backed this up again and again, affirming an immigrant's right to sue for this support. Plus, if your ex were to go on certain means tested public benefits, the government agencies that paid out could also sue you for reimbursements. Food stamps, Medicaid, Medicare. I just want you guys to understand this is it's a thing, and that's how serious the government takes this promise that you guys made. Now, the I-864 affidavit of support is your financial burden that you're voluntarily getting into before you fly this person into the US. And you made a promise to the government, not your spouse. And the law holds you to that guarantee no matter what happens to the marriage. All right. Now we've covered the financial side. Now for the question that causes the most confusion. Will my spouse be deported if we get divorced? The act of divorcing itself doesn't automatically trigger deportation. First, a quick clarification. If you were married for less than 2 years when the green card was approved, your spouse gets a conditional 2 year green card. It's basically a probationary period. And that is what people like Darwin Finnis was talking about, the conditional green card. If you were married for more than 2 years at the approval of the green card, they get a 10-year permanent green card. So if you want to get around that sponsorship status scenario and you're married to your partner for 2 or 3 years in their country, and then you fly over to the United States with your partner after 2 years, 3 years, and apply for the green card status. Once you've gone through whatever investigation process, they're going to give you the straight up 10-year green card instead of giving you the conditional. But if you just got married a couple months ago, if you just got married inside of the last year and a half, they give you a 2 year, right? If your spouse has a 10-year green card, a divorce usually doesn't affect their status. And likewise, the citizenship that they've obtained typically keeps you from having to deal with that $19,000 government contract situation, because that is something for the spouse that has not uh, gotten their citizenship yet. Now, they are a permanent resident because they got that 10-year green card, and the government is already satisfied the marriage was legitimate. Now, a divorce might mean they have to wait 5 years to apply for citizenship instead of the 3 years if they didn't get everything done in a timely fashion. But once they got that citizenship, you're less likely. So let me make it clear to you. Green card and citizenship are not the same thing. But the green card can get them residency, and the citizenship can come faster. The um, the temporary or conditional green card is a 2 year probationary period that they investigate you before they give you the full 10-year green card. You're still got that period of waiting before they get the official citizenship information. And during that time frame, if they don't have their citizenship and you got to get a divorce, they are your financial responsibility. So that is clear. After that, though, in these situations, if they want to come after you for anything, they're coming after you for the regular alimony. Before the official citizenship situation happens, if they have their green card for 10 years, but they don't have citizenship, if they have the right to be in the country and the residency with the right to stay in the country and don't have citizenship for 10 years, they're your financial responsibility for 10 years. But at some point, they have to finish the citizenship process. And once they finish it, they're no longer your liability. So you got to take that part into consideration. So even though you hate your ex, you divorced your ex, you have to proactively aid your ex into getting their citizenship so that your ex is no longer your financial responsibility. Okay. But their green card itself isn't in danger. So there's a authorization to be in the United States isn't in jeopardy there. The real issue is with the conditional green card. To go from a 2 year card to a 10-year card, you and your spouse have to file the form I-751, petition to remove the conditions. This form is supposed to be filed jointly, where the husband and wife file. This is where guys think they have the leverage. If you're divorcing, the U.S. citizen spouse may threaten to withdraw support, but this doesn't automatically lead to deportation. The law provides the immigrant spouse with a path forward, a waiver of the joint filing requirement. They can file the I-751 by themselves if they can prove that even though the marriage ended, it was entered into in good faith, meaning that they thought that this was going to work, but it didn't. This good faith marriage waiver is their strategy. Now, their job is to convince the USCIS that when you both got married, you're truly intended to build a life together. And it wasn't just for a green card. The divorce itself doesn't automatically mean they get deported. USCIS knows that real marriages sometimes fail, but the burden is now on them to prove the marriage was legitimate from the start. So, how do they prove it? It all comes down to the evidence. They will build a case file that tells the story of a real relationship. This will include proof of a shared life. That means there's going to be documents showing you live together and that your spouse is key, like a joint lease, utility bills, a driver's license with the same address on it. I'm going to be honest with you. My spouse ain't going to come across that. All my information is locked in. And when she gets information, it's like different. And everything is paid for by the business. So is she going to be on the utility bills? No, because I'm not on the utility bills. So, you got a lot of questions going on here. Comingly bringing together your finances, combining your finances. Typically, if you work and she works and you're taking care of you and she's taking care of her family overseas, or you're taking care of her and you're giving her money to take care of her family overseas and she's taking care of her family overseas, you're probably going to see that she's not contributing to the relationship. This is some of the strongest evidence. They will gather joint bank account statements if there are any, joint credit card bills if there are any, and jointly filed tax returns if there are any. If there aren't any, you're still looking at the possibility to prove a marriage, but it starts getting more difficult. Evidence of the relationship. You're looking at photos from throughout the relationship, travel itineraries, and sworn affidavits from friends and family who can attest the relationship was real. Now, if you get these sworn affidavits from friends and family members, y'all travel together, uh, photos of y'all looking happy. This evidence is not something that you can just sweep under the rug when you're pissed off at your spouse and you're trying to leave. So the other two scenarios that aren't always accessible to the foreigner isn't exclusionary if it doesn't exist, because this right here is a important part of proving the marriage exists as well. Proof of children, if there are any. Because if you had children together, their birth certificates are powerful proof. Doesn't matter which country the children were born in. If you have children together, that shows that you guys had something. And if the children are still alive and you're taking care of those children and she's watching the kids, that's where the first two stipulations fall off the plate, because if she's a stay-at-home mom, she's not working, she's not contributing, and if you didn't update your information, but she's got your current information, that's where the kids are staying at right now. The information doesn't have to all line up, but the kids and the societal statements does aid with the ability to prove that the relationship 2 out of 4, but they still have to analyze the situation to prove that the relationship is real. And then you have the divorce decree. Now, they must include a copy of the final divorce decree. If the divorce isn't final, they can submit proof it's in progress, and the USCIS will usually request a final decree later. Now, what if the US spouse claims that they were tricked and manipulated into a fraudulent marriage? An accusation alone is not enough. USCIS will investigate, but the foreign spouse still has the opportunity to present their own evidence that the marriage was a bona fide marriage. So you would have to document, for example, if they only married you for the green card, they only married you for the citizenship, if they were behaving a certain way until the moment they got approved and then they switched out on you and started behaving completely different, you would have a history of positive behavior, a abrupt sudden change, and now you have a history of negative behavior. And the time between when they switched out and when they got their green card would be evidence of the fraud. Now, if you guys are doing well and then the husband cheated, or like we're about to talk in a minute, the husband's abusive, those behavior patterns would be qualifiable for divorce, with or without being a foreigner. And, you can't really say that the marriage was a sham just because as a dude, you screwed up the marriage. Likewise, ladies, if you cheated on your spouse, just because you cheated on your spouse doesn't mean that the marriage was a sham. You just screwed up the marriage. So she can still get her citizenship and she can still get her green card outside of the divorce. Just because you're unhappy with her doesn't mean that she's going to get shipped back out of the country. This isn't a return to sender scenario. Now, about that abuse, there is another powerful waiver for cases involving spousal abuse or extreme cruelty under the Violence Against Women's Act. Note that they make laws for people who are disadvantaged. This is a separate confidential protection. The WVAW, or the VAWA, I was looking at that wrong, is for everyone. Despite its name, VAWA is a gender neutral and protects all victims kind of document from abuse. Men, women, and LGBTQ individuals who are married to a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. A man who has suffered abuse, spouse has the same coverage and same rights to petition by themselves for a green card as a woman in the same situation. But this is to protect the foreigner from abuse from the U.S. citizen. Okay. Now, what if the U.S. citizen is the victim? Well, the VAWA is designed to protect the immigrant spouse from having to rely on their abuser for legal status. If a male U.S. citizen is abused by his foreign spouse, his recourse is through the state domestic violence laws and family courts. He can seek restraining orders and press criminal charges, while the convictions for domestic violence can lead to deportation for the foreign spouse. The abuse claim itself is a state matter, not an immigration one handled by the VAWA. So recognizing that In America, you marry an American woman and she beat your ass is just whooped. But because I mean, you can get the restraining order, you can get the divorce, but that's about it. If you get the divorce, you might be able to get the divorce and not have to deal with the alimony because you're removing yourself from an abusive situation. And it depends on what assets you guys separate because the division of assets is still going to be there. But the fact is that you would be able to make that divorce and that's it. With the foreigner, the abuse, whether it be physical or psychological and emotional, the abuse is still the abuse and documented proof of abuse in family court that leads to criminal court. That you can get the divorce in family court, and then any type of criminal charge, egregious in nature, is subject to deportation. But that would be the path that would have to be taken to remove your ex out of the country. But you got to prove that. So none of that, waiting to exhale when you beat your own ass with a sock full of oranges. None of that stuff. You have to literally have real time situations where you've had to call the police, they've had to detain her, you've had conversations with your therapist over an extended period of time. You've got journals, you've got videos, you've got audio. You would have to have like real evidence that you're in an abusive situation. And depending on the two-party record state and wiretapping laws, you have to make sure that whatever state that you're in, that you might have a contract with your spouse before when the relationship is fun, that they agree to be under surveillance during the relationship, where to whatever degree that that contract is allowed, that any video and audio recordings about the relationship is authorized or waiving their right to refuse it under the wiretapping laws and everything like that, because if they don't give consent before the video and audio file records, it's if it is a private conversation, it's illegal. So you don't want to get yourself in trouble with that. You want to cover your bases and have them while they're sober and happy sign that piece of paper and say they waive whatever while they're in your presence. Now, that's going to be a two-sided actionable kind of contract because both parties are agreeing to be documented by the other party. And if you're saying that it's for the sake of the proof of the marriage, for the green card and immigration, they might readily agree to that. But that also means that how you talk to them and how you treat them will be documented and can be used against you in a court of law as well. So you gotta make sure that you pay attention to what you do and how you do it. Now, the key takeaway is this: divorce does not equal deportation. The law expects the real marriages can fail. The ones where if your partner is threatening to Michael gonna dig a hole in the backyard. We ain't worried about deporting nobody. That's a lot of work, Michael. But if you got like 20 acres of property and a nice backhoe, 20 feet, because they typically give up after the first 6 to 8. So if you're uh, excavating 30 feet down and then put you some exotic plants on top of it, yeah, that might be a thing. But to me personally, I feel like you should just like walk away from the relationship, just like let them go. But you need to know what you're getting yourself into, and that's one of the reasons why if you went out there on a business visa where you had 12 months in the country, you might meet her inside of the first 2 months. Y'all might been dating for 8 months before y'all get married. You make sure that she's going over all of these rules and non-negotiable expectations for behavior that you're going to have, where you're going to treat her like a princess, treat her like a queen, but she must give you that non-negotiable respect for that citizenship. Uh, and you're going to fly her to your country. She puts in the work. Y'all have the understanding. You're getting her everything that she wants and everything that she needs to the best of your ability. She's doing what you want and doing what you need. Y'all are going to have fights. It's still going to be a marriage. It's not going to be perfect, but she understands that no bullshit is no bullshit. Otherwise, you're not going to marry her. Now, once you marry her, you're stuck. Once you sign the papers to the U.S. government, you're stuck. All right. Once you ship her to America in that freight container, you stuck. Now, until you get her to agree and go back, you're stuck. Now, can you have other such personal contracts between you and your wife that's actionable in court to offset the federal government thing? Of course you can. Whether or not the contract is legitimately enforceable depends upon what type of agreement you guys have, because they cannot the government cannot enforce any contracts that involves intimacy between the two parties. It is an action-based contract where, for the sake of effort, you're entitled to compensation, and for the lack of effort, then you might have to deal with reimbursement of compensation, something to that magnitude. But and then if you have a breach of agreement, then whatever the penalty is for the breach of agreement. Now, if you put up a contract of physical effort for the sake of room and board and such things, and that contract has a penalty of an outrageous number that your partner signs and agrees to, when that contract is proven breached in a civil court, you would be suing your spouse for the breach of that contract, where their compensation to you for breach of that contract would compensate your federal obligation to pay them compensation, and it'll zero itself out. Doesn't mean that the obligation isn't there. You still got to compensate until they reimburse you. But the fact is that what you're putting up in the court system to cover them under the federal law is being given back to you under the breach of contract from the civil law. So you got to look at you got to cover all your bases there. And if you're putting yourself into the situation or planning to put yourself into the situation, you really need to look at the ins and outs of this. But once you get a clear understanding of what you expect from your spouse and they accept that, as long as you guys move forward in a positive fashion, you should not see any negative switching out, because again, it takes 66 days to formulate a behavior pattern. If your partner is um, performing the way you want them to perform for 8 or 9 months before the marriage, and then they're going to perform that performance for another 2 years in the marriage, as long as you don't do something to change how they feel about you and change the way they treat you over that 3 years, your partner should be good to go. Once they get their permanent 10 year, you should have the kind of partner that'll be dedicated to your success the way you're dedicated to their success for the next 10 years, which is like 13 years. And those individuals from the Philippines, Vietnam, Japan are the kind of the cultures where they will give you 10, 15, 20 years of their life trying to make the marriage work before they say, screw it, let's get a divorce. But I mean, if they're divorcing you after 10 years, they should already got their citizenship. So it's not like they're financial burden to you. He said, if you're already milking the cow, why get married? Because if they don't live in America, you can milk the cow all you want in their country, but you can't bring them to America without being their sponsor. And you can't stop being their sponsor until they get citizenship. And if they're not married to you, they're but you got to also understand, if they're coming over on a marriage green card, a marriage visa, uh, their presence is as your dependent. So if you don't do that correctly, you will have a financial responsibility of them until they get their citizenship. Now, if they come over some kind of way and then y'all split up, uh, y'all don't have to stay together, but they have to stay your liability for 10 years. So do you want to pay, do you want to fly somebody to America and pay them for 10 years to stay in America? Or uh like how does that work out for you? Because otherwise you would leave them in their country, fly to their country, enjoy the life of Raleigh while you're in their country, and then fly back and be a lonely man until you fly back to their country again and do the same thing next year. Now, if you move to their country as a retired expat, and you're digital nomads, your money's being made for you, and you're able to go and live in their country for an undisclosed period of time without any worries, um, whether you have residency there or whatever. You can do all kinds of things. You can do polygamy and everything like that because you can only most countries around the world only allow you to marry one person, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a wife and a girlfriend as long as culturally the people in the neighborhood aren't really making a big stink about it. But that's only going to fly in that country because you're not going to be able to fly your wife and your girlfriend back to America. You're only going to be able to fly your wife back to America. Now, if you've got a business and you're able to legitimately claim that person as an employee, that's where the HB1 scrutiny is coming into play. The EBWs and H1Bs, where you have to prove that you have a legitimate business, you have to prove that you have legitimate job titles for this person, and you have to prove that their valuability to your company exists in order for them to get citizenship as your employee. But then you also have to understand that if you're dating your employees, you also have those sexual harassment laws that can be used against you if she gets mad in America, which means she could tank your business and your personal life. So it's not always, if for every good thing that could potentially come from making a bad decision, there's also bad catastrophic failure, which is why you have to look at what your alternate goals are, and then decide what benefits you and what doesn't benefit you, and how could this go south, and how can you avoid the negative consequences of going south. He said, does the mother come with her? Well, if you're moving to this country with your wife, you're just moving with your wife. But if you go to a certain country where you're marrying the breadwinner of the family, and you get into an arrangement with that family where your wife will stay with you and you will fund their existence. Well, that's one of those contracts that, because that's almost like a dowry, that's one of those contracts where she's going to perform for you in the United States. And if and as long as she's performing for you in the United States, you're going to be compensating for her family. Again, if you're sending that money back to her family, you can document the money that you're sending back to her family and prove that that 18,000 or 19,000 a year that you're paying for your wife is going towards whatever it is that your wife wants it to go towards, because you don't have to pay for her room and board because she can sleep on a sidewalk and send that money back home. You just have to prove that money went to her from you to prove that you've been doing your share as far as that's concerned. Um, you're not flying the whole family to America. The family doesn't have an anchor family green card or visa status. You're only bringing your wife or husband with you to the country. If you have a child with that person, you will bring the child and the parent of the child that you're married to the country. But that's all that you do. Now, if you are pulling this off after 2028 and they're no longer giving that $1,000 stock option for the kids, you could potentially give birth to the child in Asia if you're going to Asia, because Asia pays for the child's care if the child is a native while you're in Asia. And then you can fly to America and get the child citizenship with the mother, because citizenship happens if at least one parent is a US citizen. And then by the time the child is old enough to need that citizenship status, the child has a citizenship status, but the child could be well taken care of for free, or not free, but at a reduced rate in a third world country. But that would be you moving to their country and staying there 2 to 5 years. And if you did that and you married the person over there and then you flew back to America with a 5 year marriage from a foreign wife or a foreign husband, you fly to America with your wife or your husband and your child. Because that marriage existed more than 2 years, you don't have the conditional green card. Your spouse gets that 10 years straight up, and then they can work towards their citizenship. So there's a lot going into that, uh, but you got to know what you're getting yourself into. And again, while this is one of the things that's going to make these dating apps, especially those foreign dating apps, very effective because if you're looking for a bride or a husband from an overseas, you don't want to spend the money to go live overseas. You get certain dating apps that will connect you with that person, and then you and that person maintain communication with one another for a year or so, and then you fly over, and then y'all hang out with one another for a couple of months, do the marriage thing, and then fly back where you're going to start doing the in-person thing now. You would have had an online relationship, which I don't know how much they value those with immigration, but you would have had an online relationship for a period of time, and then you had an in-person relationship for a short period of time, and then y'all married and moved to the United States. And that still would be some kind of evidence towards a good faith intent towards a real marriage, bona fide marriage kind of situation, which allows for the person, if y'all break up because they don't like some of your bad habits behind the scenes and y'all end up getting a divorce, they would still be able to divorce you and still be able to have citizenship and still be able to put you on alimony and still be able to get that $19,000 a year from you. So there is no situation. Mail order bride. But a mail order bride. Look, here's a you would do better instead of a mail order bride. You would do better doing the previous thing that I told you about is having that chick that is the breadwinner of her family, where you have a contract with her and her family that you will send her family money to support her family while she stays with you in America. That shit would be way easier because whatever the hell they're going to be asking for is going to be cheaper than what an American woman is going to ask for. And she will be as a job working as your wife, and she will have no problems with doing what you reasonably ask for as long as you're taking care of her family back home because women that are family oriented will put in the work to make sure that their family is taken care of. Whatever they got to do within reason, they will do it to take care of their family. So if you are taking care of their family, in fact, better than what the girl could have took care of her family if she would have been back home working on whatever job she was working on back home, then that person will dedicate more effort to your success and your relationship would have less chaos in it. As long as you're not throwing it up in her face, all the money that you're sending back home, as long as you're not, leveraging your effort to her as a way to control her, as long as that stuff's not happening, you would have a partner because she's getting something out of the deal and you're getting something out of the deal. It's a transactional marriage, but it's a legitimate transactional marriage. But you get more cooperation that way. You get one from one of those destitute rural areas that there isn't enough going on over there, and you're like, hey, I throw you some U.S. dollars down there and improve your standard of living. Yeah. Now, should you have to do that? Of course not. But humans are humans. Everyone's got a price. It just matters how much you have to pay. And if you find that person, like you say, mail order bride, outside of trafficking situations, if she's voluntarily willing to put up with this type of contractual agreement, you are better off with that. And mail order brides like mail order husbands, because the alpha boss ladies that are making $250,000 a year, they can get their husband shipped in from overseas too. The fact is that it's easier to do if your spouse has something to gain from it. If they're just here because it makes them feel good, when it stops making them feel good, they're not going to want to be here anymore. But if they're doing this because they want to do this, because they're benefiting for this for the sake of their family and friends, they're going to want to do this. They're going to be in it. And that's what you guys have to recognize. That's what you guys have to iron out. By filing a strong I-751 waiver petition with a solid evidence, your ex spouse can remove the conditions on their residency. And if y'all file joint, you can remove the conditions on their residency and secure their future in the United States, or they can secure their future in the United States on their own. So, to recap, the hard truth here, the world of immigration laws is full of rumors, but you guys need facts to protect yourselves. First, that viral rumor of 50-50 divorce bans, it's absolutely a lie, completely fiction. President can't state family law, which He can't change it either. And the property will be divided and handled in state courts. Second, your real financial risks comes from the federal contract with the United States government, not your marriage agreement, and the I-864 affidavit of support overrules a prenuptial agreement. If you are taking on a financial liability while this person is in the United States until they're a U.S. citizen. And since you made a binding promise to the United States government to keep your spouse above 125% of the poverty line, understanding that the poverty line increases with inflation, the obligation survives divorce and can be enforced in court, where understandably the green card is not the citizenship and they have to gain the citizenship. So it takes them 10 years or longer to get the citizenship. They are your financial liability that entire time, as long as they are not above the poverty line. So if your spouse needs $19,000 to stay above the poverty line and they have a $30 or $40,000 a year job, you are free from responsibility. This is not extra money. You are saying that if they cannot maintain a status above 125% poverty line, you will pay the difference, even if that means you have to pay for all of it. You need to take this seriously. The third thing, the divorce doesn't have to mean the end of your ex-spouse's life in America. Because if they have a 2-year conditional green card, they can file to remove the conditions by themselves by proving the marriage was in good faith or in cases of abuse through the VAWA self petition. With strong evidence, they can secure their permanent residency and move forward independently. If you are documenting everything that's going along. And funny thing is, all of the relationship advice that I've been giving you guys for the past 6 months is journal what's going on, revisit your concerns, communicate, communicate, communicate. If you're documenting the ups and downs of the relationship, if you're documenting the positive and negative ways your partner is communicating with you, this is a healthy marriage. But also, if the behavior patterns that you're experiencing is reflective of psychological and emotional abuse, you can recognize this with your therapist. And if that ends up being the grounds for divorce, you can utilize that in divorce court. If they're violent with you and they're causing you actual real criminal harm, you can use that in criminal court with restraining orders. Now, the reason why I point this out is because, ladies, y'all act emotionally. And I'm going to start there. And the reason why I'm going to start there is because if you like your boyfriend or your husband and he says something funny and you hit him, that's assault. If you scare your husband and you hit him, that's assault. If you are mad at your husband and you hit him, that's assault. I want you to understand that while men do not, if you throw a drink on a man, ironically, even water, saliva, if you spit in his face, it's aggravated assault. You have to understand that if you make contact with your partner, it can be perceived as abuse. So she kicks me when she's excited. She punches me when she's sad. She slaps me when she's angry. And this is true to life behavior patterns. While women have clear roller coasters of emotions, you have to not be physical with your spouse, because this actual behavior documented can show a history of abuse, physical abuse, where then that physical abuse can be actionable in a divorce court. And he ain't got to give you nothing alimony wise. He's got to take care of you until they deport you. But if you're physically abusive and then ISIS decides to come and ship you off because you're violent, then at that situation, you're shipped off to your other country. So if you're not American, don't love tap. That love tap, that's assault. Do not hit your man. And if you're a man, you don't hit women anyway. But ladies, do not hit your man. Don't hit him in fun. Don't hit him in anger. Don't hit him in fear. Do not hit your man, because the more often that is documented that he got hit today, that could play a negative role against you if y'all separate. So document everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But you guys have to understand, like Michael's saying, y'all got to listen to what this man is saying. That is where, this situation takes a huge turn, because if a man, even men can be in abusive relationships, and if they're afraid of what to do to get out of that relationship, the same way a woman can be afraid of what to do out of this relationship, you got to understand, if you hit them, ladies, sometimes dudes can go to jail, but legal action can be taken against these females in civil court, in family court, that could benefit the sanctity of the dude. Does not protect all of your assets, because if she contributed towards your success during the marriage, then she's entitled to something, but it does part ways with your civil and state level obligations. You still have that financial contract with the government. But if she gets deported for being abusive, then that terminates the contract right there. The deportation, because when the person is deported, they usually have a 5 to 10 year ban on the deportation, which means they can't come back into the country for an extra period of time. And being away from the country for, I do believe, 3 to 6 years, something to that effect, voids consistently being away for an extended period of time, not for work related purposes, voids your green card ambitions, your citizenship ambitions. So, because I actually been following that with the H-1Bs and the EBWs, that if you spend extended periods of time in other countries, it can be perceived as abandonment of your pursuit of citizenship. So if you get deported, you have forfeited your citizenship rights. And if you forfeit your citizenship rights, the contract to the government for him to pay for her is no longer there. Right. Navigating the, he says, a man is guilty until proven innocent in the court of law. You're right. Most Americans are guilty, though, because while that is a saying that hypothetically you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, society treats you as guilty to the accusation until you prove yourself innocent of that accusation. It is what it is. Nothing you can do about it. Even if you are innocent, because you have a lot of people that are in prison 5, 10, 20 years before new evidence proves that they were wrongfully incarcerated. And those people are released into society with a prison mentality after being incarcerated for half their life for a crime they did not commit. The law is not finite. People fall through the cracks, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And you have to navigate how to be safe around this. And with the real IDs and the mandatory deportation laws, if you are not an American citizen, you got to be careful about what you do and how you do it. Because if you don't, you will be putting yourself in a compromising situation when the people that can put you in that dark colored van with no windows and drop you off in a US black site with no phone calls where your rights no longer exist, you're going to have to answer questions when you get there. And when you start answering those questions, if you don't have the right answers, they're going to have you in a nice, disgustingly looking ship, probably really badly fabricated shipping containers, and run you back to wherever you came from. I'm gonna be real with you. It's not always the peaches and cream that people talk about. There's a lot of negative things that happens in every country. The better things are, the worse things are behind the scenes. It is what it is. But what you have to understand is that you got to know how to protect yourself. And first, recognizing the laws that applies to your situation, doing what you know is right, standing up for what you believe in by any means necessary, and accepting the consequences of your actions before you perform those actions, even if those consequences are not favorable to your agenda, because you knew what you were getting into when you signed them fucking papers. You knew what you were getting into when you got on that plane. You knew what you were getting into when you got off the plane. Now that the situation is not in your favor, you have to deal with that. Navigating the intersection of immigration and family law is incredibly complex and very, very high stakes. You might want to make sure that you have your family lawyer on retainer for each of you. Your financial future is going to be on the line throughout this entire process. So I want you guys to make sure that you pay attention to what you're doing and answer the right questions. Now, while we've given you the framework in tonight's show, every case is different. So this is not something that you should try to handle based on what you read online. Your future is far, far too important for that. I strongly urge you guys to make sure that you speak with an experienced attorney who understands both family laws and the specifics of the immigration obligations for the marriage visas and the sponsorship agreements with the United States. You need a strategy to protect both your money and your future. And if you care about your partner, you want to try to protect your partner too until your partner becomes your enemy. If you found all of this no bullshit breakdown helpful, I want you guys to make sure to stay informed with more of the facts to cut through the noise. Make sure that you guys take the time to like and subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter and Twitch, and hit the notification bell on YouTube because knowledge is your best defense. Remember what we had with Reading Rainbow, the more you know, and with G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle. You have to have knowledge. They say the pen is mightier than the sword because knowledge is the greatest weapon that is a non renewable resource next to time. You guys have to gain that knowledge so that you the wrong way. There are negative consequences involved with that. With that being said, Michael rode the wave with us. I appreciate you hanging out with us towards the end of the show, Michael. Thank you so much for giving us that time. I know you're off to play chess. Uh, Ladies, as long as the situation doesn't make sense, I'm going to keep asking you ladies to make it make sense. So, ladies, please make it make sense. And fellas, we're about 69% male driven podcast from the male perspective. The ladies are starting to flood in. So, you got to understand while I give you this information to make you guys higher value men based on improving your ability to make and invest and sustain your finances and improve your personal lives, you have to understand that this information is not gender exclusive and the ladies can take this information and make them higher value women as well. Um, Anything that you don't like about your life that you can control, you can proactively put forth the effort to change how you live your life and how you let the things that you can control around you impact your life. And if you don't like something, you need to first recognize that and then do something different. Likewise, um, if you did not know what to do to make changes, there's always another way. You just got to know where to look. Here on this and that, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. You can come here and ask in any one of the comment sections after the show on one of the post live shows, like some of the other fans have done, and ask questions about how to make things different, how to make things better, how to find an alternative to. There are a lot of things that you can change in your life, and there's a lot of things that you have to navigate through because not every bad decision that you've made in your past you can just make go away. Sometimes you got to serve your time for that charge. Sometimes you've got to accept that bankruptcy timeline. Sometimes you have to accept that child support payment. There are things that you just cannot change. Those are things that are outside of your control. But how people behave around you, how you behave with the people around you, how you allow them to use you, and how you use them, and how y'all benefit from each other, what kind of network you have, how much you benefit from that network, how much that network benefits from you, how much you can benefit from your employer versus how much your employer benefits from you, how much you benefit from your relationships, family and romantic relationships versus how much they benefit from you. You can control these things. And if there's anything that needs changing and you don't know what to do, come and talk to me because a lot of the time, hindsight is 2020. You can look back and find all kinds of ways to fix the problem. But when you were in the problem, you weren't making good choices. There was only one choice that you could make in the heat of anger, and it isn't the right one all the time. So before you do something that you regret, before you say something that you regret, take a step back off of that scenario, come to the podcast, ask me, tell me what's going on. We'll work it out together. I will provide you with positive ways to address the situation so that you can resolve it in your favor or in a neutral position where you are not extremely fucked over in that situation. And that is the best course of action because negative behavior, negative actions is going to lead you with a series of consequences. You think that you can talk trash about somebody and defame their character, and y'all understand defamation. These women be talking mad cash about their exes, but you understand that if you destroy that man's character, he can sue you for defamation of character. So y'all be talking trash about your ex-boyfriends on social media. If he can get that public post, if he can grab a bunch of those public posts and then show how those public posts have damaged his reputation, he can sue you for that. This stuff is real. We stop fighting in the streets because if you punch somebody in the face, they can sue you for $30,000 for punching them in the face. So who really won that fight? The person who got beat up or the person who got paid for it? Think about what happened to Rodney King. He got millions of dollars for getting his ass whooped by the police. Who really got over in that situation? The man who got millions of dollars or the guys who had a few laughs and then lost all of their jobs and their careers was over and all this other stuff? Michael says sometimes ask a senior. They already gone through it. Sent with love. And he's right. Talk to your elders. Here in America, we are detached from the last generation. 20 and 30-year-olds do not have positive relationships with our 50 and 60-year-old counterparts. We should be able to talk to our grandparents, our great grandparents, our aunts and uncles. If y'all ain't got no old family, because all y'all family that moved away or died out, y'all can just go make friends with an old person in a senior citizen home because they need friends anyway. And y'all can start talking to old folks that are good at communicating. And they can tell you how it used to be versus how things are now. And I can tell you right now, they give you some damn good advice. And they're not going to give you that kick them in the dick kind of situation. They will tell you what you really need to know. Or, like Michael said, if you own your own property, call 811. Michael got jokes. With that being said, that's all we have for tonight on this and that. Thank you guys for coming. I'm your host, Xander, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. Right, real quick before we walk off, I want you guys to note that you should have Soldier Orchid Island stock and start buying into your International Seaway stock because International Seaway's ex dividends is next week. So you need to start getting into your International Seaway stock right now. It's gone up about 25 cents since last week. If you have already gotten it last week, you would have made you some money. Get it while you can. By next week, you know that it's supposed to be giving us like 75 or 80 cents a share as dividends. It's the ex dividends is going to shift on the sell date. You want there to be a 75 or 80 cent increase so that when you sell, you get those ex dividends and you're good to go. So I'm just trying to let y'all know out the gate, make sure that you do what you're supposed to do so that you can walk away with that with a win. Again, thank you guys, and I'm going to see you guys tomorrow night.
Chase validation, now I validate myself. Building inner strength, putting doubt upon the shelf. No more unnecessary drama, no more wasted time. Climbing higher, constantly making my own climb. My network is That's my personal command. I'm not mounted on higher ground where excellence is found. My potential knows no bounds, raising the bar, breaking ground. I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision, cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield to mediocrity and chaos. I will never I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision, cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield to mediocrity and chaos. I will never yield.